back and forth. I need to move this out the way. Or just in case I have to. Like I better go ahead. Joe, how's it going? Just in case I have to switch the charger because the lead runs long. Just, I'm gonna go ahead and plug this here. Sorry, it's a little bit of a mess here. Sorry, everyone. Ellie, take a picture of those Beasley K signs. Saying thank you.
But we got a call.
You doing all right today? Good. All right.
Or I guess he's not, I think.
We'll wait for everybody to get here. Once they call in.
I told her I'd be here about 5 still, so I was thinking about maybe just call in. If not, I can call her. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Well, you guys can come. And I put you pretty close to the beginning, so you wouldn't have to hang out the whole time. So.
They probably just came to hear us.
Yeah, they did. Hey, how you doing?
How are you? Hey, having a hard time finding a place to park?
A little bit.
Well, I was late closing actually, so just got out of the office.
Where's your office closed?
What's that?
In your office closed?
Oh, wait, is it closed? Yeah, it's,
Down
Old Post
Post
Office.
Oh.
All right. Good evening, everyone. This is the Craighead County Library Board meeting. It's been a long anticipated meeting. Okay, I sound pretty good on here. The meeting will be starting very shortly. So everybody, just please tune in. Please share this video.
Oh, yeah, I mean, not really information. Yeah, got it. Well, I found a lot of the FOIA law too. Yeah.
I have not done anything yet. I'm waiting for the phone call.
Okay, library board members, I've placed mics in front of each and every one of you. If we can maybe just do a quick test while you start. Mr. Nichols.
Testing.
Ms. Eskew.
Testing.
Ms. Tate is not here yet. Mr. Johnson.
Testing.
Mr. Hawkins.
Hold on.
Testing.
Ms. Griffin.
Testing.
Mr. Eckert.
Testing.
Ms. Okay, which one are you the height? So you're 4 on, all right, do it again.
Testing.
Okay.
Ms. Tate's coming.
Ms. Rock, okay, I'll come back to Ms. Tate. Ms. Rock?
Testing.
Okay, yeah, yours a little low. Ms. Yes, okay, yes. Well, we use your authority.
Test.
Okay. All right, Ms. Tate, I got you the green one.
Thank you.
Ms. Tate?
Turn it on, see if it'll work.
Testing, testing.
Also, just so we don't get feedback and crosstalk, when you're not speaking, please turn your mic off. For everyone except for Ms. Riles and guests, you just simply slide the switch up and down. For you all, you just simply push and hold the power switch. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
She's gonna do by Zoom, I think.
Oh, okay.
He's gonna finish it. Dr. Lilly?
Hi, yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure you're on, okay?
Yes, but I was thinking about dialing in from a landline, if that works.
Okay, do you want to dial this number, then I'll hang up, and then you dial in, and then we're ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, all right,
Bye.
bye. Okay, Dr. Lilly?
Yes,
Okay, all right, we're good to go then. Okay,
I'm one of those here who have landline phones.
I understand.
Okay, just before we get started, I just want to make sure we all understand some of the rules. Please keep your masks on at all times, or please above your nose and your mouth. Please don't move the chairs around. We have them marked where they should stay. Please keep them there. If somebody leaves and then there's an empty chair, somebody else can come and take that spot if they want to. Otherwise, all the standing room only is only in the back there, okay? I think that's all the rules. We really don't want to have any signs, anything like that. It's just from a safety point of view. We don't want to block anybody's view, anything like that. So, thank you.
Okay.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I just need to say a couple little things before we get started. I know we've got a lot of different points of view here, and let's be respectful of each other's views. I know that all of us have the best interests of the children of Craighead County, and we just may look at it a little different way, but we should still respect other people's opinions, even though they may not be yours. There've been a little things in the public about where I was at the last meeting, so I just wanted to address that for a second. I was on a vacation I had planned 4 months ago. Honestly, I didn't know the library board was that exciting then, but anyway, and I was in California when Miss Eskew called me and asked me to set up a meeting on that Monday, and I told her at the time that I thought it was too soon, and I wasn't even sure if I was going to be back from California because I had some flights canceled and et cetera. And I believe, according to the board rules, she can put things on the agenda, but only me can call a special session or special board meeting. So that is why I did not go to the meeting. I wasn't ready, and I did not think it was appropriate. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes from the last meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Do I hear a motion to approve?
I so move.
Do I hear a second?
Mike Johnson moves.
All in favor?
Well, you moved, right? Yeah, you need a second.
Yeah, Kurt Hawkins seconds.
Do I hear, all in favor say aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed,
Aye.
nay? Motion carries. David, are you ready to give your report now?
Yes. So I just wanted to sort of start out by saying that I understand there's a lot of interest lately in the library the past couple of months. Just wanted to give a little history of how we got to the point where we are now, okay? So in June, it's Pride Month, and we put up material in the different parts of the library with our material about that. It was up for 3 weeks. We didn't hear any comments one way or the other, good or bad, for or against. We heard our first complaint on the 22nd. We got a call And so, all right, we appreciate any kind of feedback that we get. And then I think that there was a letter to the editor in the newspaper, and then after that it kind of exploded out. And so we got a lot of feedback for and against. From our point of view, we always had more favorable feedback than we had feedback against it. So the Pride Month is over at the end of June. We took down all of that material on the 30th of June, and we put up stuff for the 4th of July because that's the next holiday that comes up. So from our point of view, everything was kind of fine. But we did hear all the complaints, and we wanted to make sure that we recognized all that. So just to let you know, for example, some of the biggest complaints that we heard was that people didn't want their taxpayer money to go to this particular type of material or this particular subject or whatever you want to say. They did not know that this was on display this month, and so people would come in and they were complaining because they were surprised when they walked into the children's department that this was up. They did not know the location of the display. Again, they were surprised that they saw this. They brought their children in, were surprised about that. There was some confusion because there was a poster that was up in the teen area, not in the little kids area, not in the juvenile area, but in the teen area. And somehow people got over there with kids. It was not intended for them, but I heard complaints about that. It was our fault that we had a tween box located near this poster. But we don't have a tween section. A tween section is really sort of a subsection of our juvenile area, which is over here. We had a box up, but you see that we're doing construction, so we kept having to take things down to allow construction to continue. That box ended up being near that poster. So I do apologize for that shouldn't have been there. That box was only for kids 10, 11, and 12 to sign up for programs for that age group, okay? So we listened to all these complaints, and we actually came up and made some adjustments to our display procedures. And these were some of the things that we had suggested. We suggested that there would be no themes at all in any of our displays for the area where the board booklets are, or where the board books are, where the little kids' books are at all. We decided we could have one designated area in the teen section and one designated area in the juvenile section. So that way nobody would be surprised. They would know where that display was. They would know if they wanted to avoid that when they bring in their children, okay? We also said that we could publish all of our different displays and put them out there well in advance on the internet. We said that we would make up lists of various and sundry subjects that would be available always on the internet. We would have them available here in the library. We suggested all of these things because we wanted to make sure we heard everybody, tried to answer some of these concerns, but we also want to make sure that we're fair. We don't want to do something for one group and not do something for another group. It's only fair. Everybody pays tax dollars to fund the library. Not just some of you. Everybody pays tax dollars. So it's only right that there's a little bit of something for everybody in the library. That's the only way it's going to work, all right? I could complain. There's lots of things in the library that I personally do not agree with. Does that stop me from buying them? No, because other people agree with it and they want that material. Everybody has to give a little bit because we're all sharing this material. So everybody has things in here that you will agree with and things that you will not agree with. That's just the way the nature of the library is. There's nothing I can do about that, okay? So all of that kind of went by the wayside. And so it was kind of ignored, which I feel sad about, but I hope that it can be reconsidered because these are some of the things that we think would be the fair way to address some of these issues. So along the way, some other things happened. It started out as an issue about display, and it quickly became an issue about censorship, where there were things that were trying to be censored out of the library. Now, censorship takes on all kinds of forms. Censorship can be as big as trying to literally get rid of the books, burning the books, taking them out of the library. Censorship can also be that you're going to put certain material in a certain spot that's going to make it more difficult for you to find that material. That is still censorship. Don't kid yourself. If we put stuff behind our desk, that is censorship. So again, all we're trying to do is just be fair, right? But along the way, there were also a lot of falsehoods that came out. There were a lot of implications about things, and there were a lot of passive-aggressive statements that were made against us, against me, making it sound like maybe we were not doing the right thing with the funds, making it sound like we were doing the mishandling things, or we were not to be trusted, or we had lied about things, okay? I wanted to address some of those things, okay? Because ultimately, the statement that sort of culminated all of this was, and I quote, "I find his actions to be unacceptable, unprofessional, and damaging to the relationship of the board members and staff," and also, quote, "to urge the library to no longer take responses from library administration at face value." Okay, that's fine, you can have that opinion, but let's talk about some of the things. Okay, so one thing that I was accused of was saying remarks against Miss Eskew, which I apologize if you had thought badly of me, because I don't think that I made any of those remarks at all. It's supposed to have happened before June, before all of this happened. Okay, so then that's kind of weird because I didn't hear about it until August. It was supposedly I had warned the staff about her. Okay, to be honest with you, and I don't mean anything against our staff, but in general, the staff, they don't really know who's on the board, or they don't really care about who's on the board. That's really my job, is to deal with the board, or Tiny's job, or the administration to deal with the board, right? They would only know board members if board members literally came into a specific area. If they had kids and they come in all the time, great, they come in all the time and they use that. The children's librarian would know those people. They really don't know the other people on the board. Okay? So it doesn't make any logical sense to me that they would that I would have said this, because there would be no reason for me to have this conversation with anybody. I've only had 2 interactions with Miss Eskew that did not involve multiple people. Once was before the June meeting, and once was after the June meeting. Everything else has been all about multiple people on multiple emails. So again, I'm not really sure why I would have said anything against her. I really don't necessarily know her very much. I don't hang out with her after hours or in that sort of a way. So I don't know anything that I would be able to say against her. So for me, it was just very confusing that this came out. The second thing I wanted to talk to you about are the audits. Okay, so today I have invited 2 people that are currently doing our current audit. They are the experts on the audit. I'm not the expert on the audit. I never claimed to be the expert on the audit. We get audits done every year. Every year, the auditors bring the audit to the board. Every year, the board looks it over, they check it to make sure it's okay, and they vote it to say, okay, we accept the audit. Every year, we send a copy of the audit to the quorum court and to the county judge so that they can see it. Every year, we send a copy of that audit to the city council and to the mayor so that they can see it. Every year, we send an audit up to the legislative audit in Little Rock so that they can see it. If there was anything that was going on, if there was anything that we are doing inappropriately, there's several sets of eyes all the way through that would be looking at this audit that would have caught something that we would have done incorrectly. Can we improve on things? Every year we get recommendations from the auditors to see how we can improve, make things tighter, make sure that we're really doing all our checks and balances. Of course, we want to do this. We want to make sure that we're treating your money and our money and everybody's money exactly the right way. Okay? Another thing I wanted to talk to you about, and it was brought up again, was about the Dr. Seuss material. They said that I lied about the Dr. Seuss material. They said that I was not telling the truth about the value of the Dr. Seuss material. So in March, the publishers of Dr. Seuss decided that there were 6 or 7 books that had pictures that were very racist against 2 different races of people. And they decided not to publish them anymore. And I have copies of 4 different articles from 4 different magazines that are telling you that at that time, they started going for $1,500, $900, $800. It was incredible, all the prices that people were willing to pay to get their hands on these books when they realized that they were not being published anymore, okay? I did not make that up. It is true that the value has gone down, but we decided to pull the books, and we did not want to put them back on the shelf because they were, if they're in any way offending 2 different races that live here with us, we don't want to put them up on the shelves anymore. We didn't know what to do with them. We did not put them in the adult area. They sat back in our tech services area for several months because we were not sure what we were going to do with them. We finally decided to contact A-State. And we thought, well, maybe they could use it from research purposes. So we reached out to them. We asked them if they were interested. They said that they were, and they came and got them. And I have a letter showing that they received these 23 books that used to belong to us, that we donated to them. Okay? Again, did not lie about this. That's what happened to the Dr. Seuss books. I wanted to talk about the quote-unquote parents' responsibility. So it states in our library card eligibility and cardholder responsibility policy, parents are responsible for the material that their child, parents or guardians are responsible for the material that their child takes out. We don't want to be the responsible. I don't want you to be responsible for my children. I don't want to be responsible for your children. You have to be responsible for your children. You have to decide what they take out. It's really quite simple. It's in both of those spots. It's also part of the patron confidentiality policy, which is a law. It's law number AR 13-2-704. You can look it up. I have copies of that here, okay? You can look all of those things up. People complain because if they come up and they want to know what their 5-year-old checked out, we cannot give them that list. We don't necessarily like the law. We wish it would be modified a little bit to add some ages to it. But again, we're not going to break the law. We're not going to go to jail for this. We're not going to get a fine for this, right? It's still ultimately the parent's responsibility. The parent, usually if it's a 5-year-old, will set up the account for the child. They can go online themselves and look up and see what their child has checked out, what their child has checked out before, the fines that you can pay. You can find out all kinds of stuff. You just have to go online. But we're not allowed to do that. We're not allowed to give that out. I'm sorry about that, but we're not allowed to do that. Okay? Just against the law, and we're not going to break the law. Hold on. Wanted to talk to you about R-rated movies, because you said, you complained that kids could get R-rated movies. That's true. Anybody can check out anything in the library, but there are no R-rated movies in the kids section. The R-rated movies are in the adult section. So if you allow your child to go to the adult section, and you allow your child to pick up that movie, and you allow your child to check out that movie, that's your responsibility, because you are the parent. Again, that's just the way it is. You are the parent, and so you decide. It's all about you. We agree with you. We don't want to take that responsibility, and we don't want to change that. But it is on you all the way around. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to talk about is the experience, because there's a lot of people that are questioning whether we have enough experience to run the library. Okay, so let me just run this down for you a little bit, okay? I have a master's degree in library science. I have 25 plus years working at libraries. I've worked as a reference librarian at a university. I've worked as a school librarian out of the country. I've worked as a teen librarian at a branch. I've worked as a librarian in charge of the youth services department. I've worked I came here in 2007, and I was the I was the assistant director until 2013, and I took over in 2013 in July. Worked a lot. Tanya has a master's degree in library science. She's got 14 plus years working in library. She's been a page, she's been a circulation supervisor at an academic library. She was the director of the Newport Public Library in Jackson County for 4 years before she came here. So she has experience working with boards, right? Sarah, our business manager, she has 6 years working at Regions as a teller, and then she became a head teller. For a while, she was in charge of a branch, and when they brought in a new person to be in charge of the branch, she had to train that person. She came here and worked for 1 year as a children's librarian, and then she was the assistant business manager for 5 years, training under the person that had done that for about 30 years before she took over about 4 years ago to be the business manager, right? The last person of our administrative staff, Jordan, she's got 2 degrees in business, 1 in finance and 1 in accounting. She worked for almost a year as a tax collector. She worked for more than 3 years now as the assistant business manager. Please don't tell us that the administration of this library does not have a lot of experience doing that, okay? And then, sort of to say it even more, all of our different departments have years and years of experience. Some of them, different departments, have more than 100 years experience working in the library, okay? We've got a lot of experience, okay? And then you can say, okay, that's great. Have all this experience. What have you done with the experience? What have you done lately, right? What have you done for me lately, right? Okay. So just to sort of tell you, do you have the other copy of this? You don't have another copy of this? Okay. So just to give you some of the things that I've done since I was the director and since what we have done as a library staff, because we work together here at the library. We improved the building safety, put up new lights, put up cameras, have guards, have better locks on the door. We re-tagged the whole collection so that you would have self-checkout stations now that we didn't have before. We updated the main bathrooms. We updated the circulation desk. We put in a brand new floor over there, right? We added 7 new study rooms going down Oak Street. We added another meeting room down at Oak Street. We added a new branch in Brooklyn just a couple years ago. Got a bookmobile. We built a new garage. Now we're expanding the children's area here. We're doing all these things. We've done all these things, right? In terms of services, we increased like 280% the amount of times that we go out to all the pre-Ks and the nursery schools since I've taken over. We also deliver all the books, and we have a book delivery system that we take to all the different pre-Ks so that they can use our collection. We increased the amount that we're going to all the nursing homes. We also bring them books. We do programs for them. We increased all of that since I've come on. We increased our ebook collection. We joined a consortium. So we went from like 19,000 ebooks to now you have access to about 90+ thousand ebooks. We have done all of these things, okay? So I just wanted to make sure that you understand these are all the things that we have done, and that I just don't understand why there's any kind of problems or doubts or anything like that about what we're doing. We think about the library pretty much 24 hours a day. I mean, and this is what we're just trying to do, is to get it better and better. I apologize that that was so long. I apologize to the board that they had heard some of those things, but I just wanted to make sure that I had been pretty silent this whole time, but I just thought, you know what, you just need to hear all this. So thank you very much. I don't think at this time.
Should there not be public comment after each thing that we do as far as a public meeting goes? If you look at how the quorum court is modeled and other meetings around the town, then it's the same thing. Like after each item, there should be an opportunity for discussion, correct?
I don't believe so. I think that the quorum court only has one
I don't know
area
if
that they comment.
The city council does not do it like that. They have one point where they have a public comment. That's the only time that they have that.
Okay, then are you limiting how many people get to speak? And I was at a city council meeting and they did not do it that way. They did ask after each item.
I think what we're going to do is we're going to follow the agenda that's on here, and then we'll kind of go from there. Does not really my decision one way or the other. I'm just making the agenda for you guys.
David, I would like to point out a couple of things. You know, you started off your conversation about not censoring, and it's wrong to censor, but we do remove R-rated movies from the children's section, correct?
We never buy R-rated movies for the children's section, so there's nothing for us to remove.
Okay. So, so I think we would all agree, as far as censorship, that we shouldn't have pornography really in the library, but especially in the children's section. I think we can all agree with that. And we shouldn't have R-rated movies in the children's section. So that is a form of censorship. Let me read you the definition of censorship. Censorship, as David said earlier, is the suppression of material that is considered obscene, as would pornography would be, right? That would be considered obscene. Let me give you the definition of obscene. Obscene is apparent to morality and virtue. So I think we all just agreed in this room, or at least I hope we did, that we have we do have morality, right? Each one of us has our own moral standards, okay? We have our own virtues. And so the question isn't whether we censor, because we do censor. We censor all kinds of material. The question is, by whose standard do we censor? So don't talk about we don't censor, because we already admitted we censor. We do censor. So the question is, by whose standard, and what do we censor? What's appropriate for children? And, we talked, the main topic, there was a lot of discussion about various things, but the main topic was the sexual type material in the children's section. For example, telling boys and girls that if they like boys and girls, then they may be bisexual if they like both, right? So that's insinuating onto that child it's really kind of tricking that child that if they like boys and girls, and that makes me proud, right? That they're bi, they can shout it out loud. So in these books, it was children depicted in these. We're talking about 4 and 5 and 6-year-old children depicted in these books. That was the main issue. I know we talked about a lot of various things, but I want to kind of bring it back to the original point, which was what's appropriate for children in the children's sections. And so they also talk about in that same book, the KBCs, that they like boys and girls. And what does that insinuate? Well, that's really insinuating an attraction, right? It's insinuating a sexual attraction. And so this is 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. So that should be something that's censored from 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. So we all may have some different standards, and we can talk about those standards, but I think we would all agree that there is a level of censorship that has to take place in the children's section. The question is, by what or whose standards do we use?
I have an example here. As I've been listening to some of this about censorship, here is a book that is not in our library, and I'm not saying it should be, but It's Just a Plant. So the message here would be to children that marijuana is just fine. Okay, and I could go down the list of books about topics that we probably would all agree that are not good messages for children. So at some point there has to be a decision made about what our community wants the library to hold.
Amanda, we need to wait till afterwards, because we're paying these auditors to be here, so we need to hear from them first.
That is fine. I just would like to reply at some point to several of the remarks there in that speech.
Are you Melissa?
Yes, I am. I'm Melissa Williams. This is Jeremy.
Are you ready for them to give a report?
There's not a mic right there. You guys want to borrow one though?
We were asked to come here to answer any questions that the board might have about prior year reports. We are not currently reporting on this year's financial statements. So we were asked to come to answer questions about prior years.
There were several questions that somebody from the public had about the audit, and we just invited them to make sure that they were answering those questions. To make
So
sure
are you
that,
taking public comment at this time about that?
well, I think that I had passed on some of the questions that you already had, and so I didn't know if you had prepared that already, the answers to some of those that you had already gotten. And then if at that point, maybe they have any other questions with regard to the audit, then they could do it at that time.
That's fine, we can address some of the issues I know that were brought up and questions that were asked. I think one of the issues that was brought up was about a qualified opinion versus a non-qualified opinion, and what was driving that and why the opinion was qualified. The county as a whole has a retirement plan that pays out when employees retire and so forth. And so in order to fund that retirement plan, the county, including the library, as they're part of that plan, they put money in different investments. Those investments hopefully earn dividends, mature, or appreciate over time, and fund those retirement plans when those employees retire. One of the things that is done each year is the state takes that, they do a calculation to see, okay, based on the age of employees and different statistics, here's what we think that at this time that the plan needs to be funded at this level. And it's either funded adequately or underfunded. If it's underfunded, there's a liability, and the entity just knows that, okay, we've got maybe possibly to kick in more money, or maybe the market has a great year next year and makes up for some of that deficit. So under generally accepted accounting principles, this liability is recorded. However, for the county, for the city, they don't use generally accepted accounting principles. They use what's called a regulatory basis of accounting, which is required by law. They don't actually report that liability on their books. They're not required to, and a regulatory basis, which they have to report under, they can't. Therefore, they also do not carve out the piece that would be the library's liability to that. Now, we could come up with a certain way to maybe allocate and figure out, okay, you know, the library has X amount of employees compared to the entire employees in the system, or maybe the library has this amount of compensation compared to the entire system. And we could find a way maybe and estimate that liability. However, again, it would be an estimate, as the number again is an estimate in the first place. So that estimate has not been recorded. Again, if you look in the footnotes, it talks about where you can go to find the entire report for the county, and to see if it's over or underfunded and so forth. That report's published. Now, I want to make clear, we did not do the audit last year, our firm, HCJ. This is the first year we're doing this audit. So I do want to make clear, I'm just here to kind of explain things. I'm not telling you it's the right way or the wrong way. But because of that, that's not on here, and so it qualifies that opinion. So that's why that opinion is qualified for this year. The other question is in regard to management discussion and analysis. Because it is a governmental entity, under generally accepted accounting principles, typically you would have a management discussion and analysis. A management discussion and analysis does not change the numbers. I think a great example might be what David talked about in his report. That was a management discussion and analysis. A lot of times if you'll see that, you may see things that talk about, okay, here's what we've done. You know, we increased, you know, membership. We added audiobooks. We improved the library. We did a capital project and so forth. So those are the kind of things that you might see in management discussion and analysis. Again, they've not done one. They've not done one for several years, it looks like, if you go back. Again, they turn in these reports to the users, which is the county, and also even up to the state. And they read those. I'm assuming if they felt like those items were needed, they would have reached out and said, hey, we really want you to include this. I don't know, and so forth. But that being said, the decision was made at some time not to include these items. And, I would say, I don't know who made that decision and at what point, but those are the reasons for the qualified opinion, and that's the reasons for the other matters as far as management discussion and analysis. As far as controls, I know there was a question on internal controls, some concern over maybe, could there be theft? Is there opportunity for theft? And I will tell you this, you can spend a lot of money and effort on internal controls. You can spend as much as you want. There's what I call a cost benefit, and that falls on the board to decide, okay, is it worth, spending this money that could prevent a theft of maybe a small amount. So there's a cost benefit, and that our job as auditors is to point out, and David mentioned, there's suggestions every year. There's suggestions that the prior auditors gave that, and those reports are available, that you can look at and say, hey, here was the issue, here's our recommendation on how to maybe solve the issue, or maybe just how to mitigate the issue, because solving the issue would not be worth the cost and effort. So they are giving those. We'll look at internal controls this year. We may have some suggestions and so forth. So the way the process works is we'll look at it. If we see areas that we think that can be made improvements, we will make suggestions. If we see areas that we would consider material, that we say, hey, you've got a real issue here, we're going to point that out, and it would even be more highlighted in our report. And then it's the board's job then to decide, okay, how are we going to tackle that issue? If it's not a material issue, they may say, hey, we're going to mitigate that issue, but to completely solve it, it's not the cost and benefit, it's not there. So I think those are maybe the three big issues that were brought up. And again, I'm not here to say it's right or wrong on what's happened in the past. And obviously we didn't do the audit in the past years. This is our current year, but I hope maybe to give you some insight on maybe what was done, and hopefully maybe that answered some questions. Or do you have additional questions?
I don't.
I just have one. Do we have a functioning treasurer on this board?
You want to address that, Dave?
I didn't hear the
A
question.
functioning treasurer, you want to
Who's our
explain why we
treasurer?
don't?
Yeah, I can explain why we don't have a functioning treasurer. We can vote for a treasurer. So in the really small libraries, they don't have enough people to have a business manager. They don't have a business manager, an assistant business manager that's going to write all the checks. So in a very small library, then the treasurer of the board maybe once a week would have to come in, and all the bills that they had gotten that week, they would have to sign all of those bills, or maybe they would have to be the second signature of the bill or something like that. We are just too big of a library. We have somebody that does that full time. That's what Sarah does full time. It's just she spends all of her days pretty much doing bank statements and reconciliations and writing checks and paying bills and ordering things and everything like that. And it's even too much for her, and so half of the time that Jordan spends is also doing some of those things. They release the funds to get paid, and they do all of those kinds of things. So the board could decide to vote for a treasurer, but I'm not sure what the treasurer would do. We even put the question out to other libraries in the state, and we asked them if they had treasurers and what they did, and most of them said they do have a treasurer because their bylaws say that they have to have a treasurer, but their treasurer doesn't do anything. In reality, their treasurer doesn't do anything. Now, we do see that there may be a point, and the board might decide on this, if there's something that costs more than, say, like $10,000 or some amount that you would require 2 signatures, then I could see maybe having the point, again, as a checks and balances, all in favor of that, having the treasurer sign off on that particular one check that would come down the pike every once in a while, along with either Tanya or I. But the way we have our checks and balances are, Tanya and I can only sign checks, but we can't produce the check. We can't make the check. Only Sarah and Jordan can make the checks, but they can't sign the checks. They can't move any of the money. They can't do anything like that. And so basically, that's our sort of checks and balances. We're always going behind each other. They set up, every one of our employees get paid through the ACH system, through an online system. They can set all that up, but they can't release those funds. But Tanya or I would have to go in and we check to make sure that everything looks fine and everybody's getting paid what they should be getting paid, and then we release the funds.
I think this goes back to what is the purpose of the board? And so, with a budget like this library has, I mean, how long have we been functioning without a board member operating as a treasurer to oversee? Not that someone has to sign checks, you know, those are decisions that can be made on the various boards that I've been involved with. What the treasurer does and other people that are assigned that can sign checks, that can all be set up in policy. But to not have one, I mean, how long has that been going on?
Based on my reading of past minutes, I believe the last time we had a functioning treasurer was in 1985. That was the point in time when we hired someone to, it was called something different back then, but it was basically to be the business manager.
Do I hear any more questions?
Specifically for the auditors?
Yes, ma'am.
We get her. Have you served on any other boards?
Me?
I think everybody.
Yes.
Oh, she won't raise her hand, I can understand.
Yes.
I have been on boards that have and have not.
I have been on boards that have and have not.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably about 50-50.
Same for me.
Me too. Usually if it's a smaller organization, they do have a treasurer, but if it's a multi-million-dollar organization, they do not.
Are there any other questions for our auditors so we can let them get on home?
It might be helpful, excuse me, and I don't have the bylaws in front of me, but to just read exactly what they say about the treasurer.
Yeah, to that point, I think the bylaws, as we have them, say that we have a treasurer. So you've got a situation where state law says the only required position for a library board is the president. Our bylaws have said treasurer. So I will say that I think probably what we need to do is either appoint a treasurer under the bylaws or vote to amend the bylaws to remove that requirement if we think that our finance committee we appoint, the auditors are doing enough there. But again, to your point, I think the bylaws have stated for a long time that the treasurer is one of the office. So we do need to take one of those two actions. I mean, you have the bylaws there? Is that true?
That is true, what you said.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it's got to be addressed one way or the other. If it's bylaws, we need to be following them, or the bylaws need to be amended.
Do you have a recommendation on which way to go there?
I mean, it's a good question, because my take on it, honestly, from the gut is if we take some of the discussion points that have been brought up about our auditing processes, and I know that we've got somebody on the October agenda who's going to speak to that some more. I think if we are, you know, we fairly regularly get our budgeting reports, we see the numbers, that's backed up in the audit. If we are also maintaining a regular finance committee to review that stuff, which we have done in the past, I don't think that there's actually a need for a treasurer because the entire board is essentially filling in that extra gap. But frankly, I'm open to either, honestly. I don't have a strong opinion about it.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
I can't hear.
She asked what, in the past, what role does the finance committee play? And if you read the bylaws again, and when I took over, and before I took over, this is what happened, is that the finance committee really just is formed once a year. And I would take to them the budget, and I would show them the proposed budget for the new year, and they would go over it with a fine tooth comb and decide what they wanted and where they wanted it, and everything was fine. Once they were fine with that, then at the next meeting, they bring it to the rest of the board, and then the rest of the board votes on it. So it's just a subcommittee, and that's the way it's set up in the bylaws. So the bylaws require that it be the chairman, and I don't remember, it's the vice chair as well, but 2 other people that would be on that subcommittee.
No. The fine, or, I believe what the finance committee says, it says there shall be a finance committee which shall be selected by the chairperson. The committee shall prepare after consultation with the director and present to the board an annual budget. We do have a finance committee. It's Mr. Johnson, Mark, and me.
Now that, I will say, that still doesn't correct the bylaw issue. Again, I know someone speaking in October on financial matters. Personally, I think we need to add it to the agenda.
Who is speaking October?
I believe you are, you not?
Robin? Okay.
Yeah, I thought so, because I know that you were just under the 10 business day deadline, but then mentioned you'd like to speak. So we're already teeing up some of those issues in October. I think we need to vote one way or the other in October just to correct the issue. And we can decide at that point whether we want to appoint or vote for a treasurer out of the group, or if we think that there are adjustments that can be made to satisfy the board in terms of checks and balances on that, then we can talk about maybe voting to them in the bylaws. But point being, I know it's on the agenda tonight. I think it should be, just so we get it cleared up. So,
And just for clarity, the finance committee has just been organized, I guess, right now, or just recently. So.
Yeah, so normally in October is when, in the September-October meeting is when that finance committee is organized, and they look at the budget for the next year, and then they bring it usually to the board meeting, usually in the October meeting or the November meeting.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
No, the county itself and the state that has the plan report on a regulatory basis. And so if there's other agencies, for instance, like the library, they're gonna have to do a separate calculation to allocate their portion of what that liability was. The state is only gonna do it for that county.
I've been looking at the library audit reports, and many of them have the assessment and analysis included. Is there a reason we don't think we need to do that, or other libraries may do that?
Is there a reason there's never been a discussion and analysis, management discussion and analysis?
I have no idea.
I mean, really, we've been doing it, Miss Phyllis Burkett was in charge of the library before me for 30 years, so I don't know when that was set up, how we do what we do. But Thomas Spade and Noble had been the CPA for a number of years, and nobody complained about it, and they did it that way all of those years. Again, we can change it to whatever else we want to do it if the board decides that they want to do something different. I mean, it doesn't really matter to me one way or the other. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that everything's on the up and up, and that we're reporting and doing everything that we need to do. So as long as that's happening, then we can do it however anybody wants to do it. Okay. Thanks for the information.
I think we need to move on to the next agenda item. You guys can go.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
This is an amendment of the bylaws to prevent motions to be made by email and email voting. Kurt, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so Mark, we talked about this a little bit last time, I did look into it. So, the one thing we looked at when you and I spoke about it previously was that there was a little bit of negative space in like the library statute for meeting, that it didn't seem to authorize it, but there wasn't language on it. The problem's with FOIA. So the State Freedom of Information Act essentially requires that all meetings be open to the public, and then specifies, and I think we talked about this a little bit last time, that you can do, I forget what the term is for it, but essentially you can do an executive meeting for very limited purposes. But even then, you have to announce to the public what it is beforehand, and you can't make a finalized decision on it. You have to go back in front of the public and then do a formal vote. So in terms of, obviously we speak via email as a group, that sort of thing, and we can speak privately with one another. And we could even go as far as to discuss potential motions, agenda items, and, even, maybe agree on them in theory. But anything like that we do, we're gonna have to come in front of everybody at the designated meeting and then formally re-vote on it, so.
Thank you for looking into that, Kurt. My intention was just to increase our efficiency, especially with COVID and just the complications that introduced it. So thank you, Kurt.
Anya, do you want to speak to what you got from the State Library Board about this?
No, that's pretty well what
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
so,
So, do we need a motion?
No, I withdraw this for consideration further going forward. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Our next agenda item is drug and alcohol policy proposed by Ms. Amanda Eskew. We have tabled that. We have a committee. Her and Mr. Johnson had both suggested to me that maybe a committee should look at it, and that is what we're going to do. Amanda, you want to take the lead on this committee and bring us back a report at the October board meeting?
Is there a third person on that committee?
Yeah.
Yes, it's
should be.
it's Miss Tate.
Yes, it is. Okay, no, that's fine, thank you.
We, real quick too, and I know you guys are discussing this in committee, I don't know if it's an issue at all. I'm not really familiar with how HIPAA interacts with drug testing, but let's make sure we think about that, because I really don't know what those interactions are at all. But obviously some of the informational stuff, because I think we've got it in there now, that the testing data is supposed to go to just the board and the director, which seems appropriate, but again, I don't know enough about HIPAA to know.
I don't think you can.
I don't.
Well, I don't know if we run into an issue, but we
Yeah.
probably need to talk to
Well,
somebody about it.
yes,
Yeah.
we
Okay.
could get
School
some
districts and not.
references on that, and some of that came from other similar entities.
Yeah, I thought that we
But-
kind of pulled a lot of the
Yeah.
language, so I figure probably we're gonna find there's some exceptioning in there somewhere, but again, I'd definitely keep it in mind.
I think I do need to point out for the audience that we already have a library drug policy, because we're kind of making it sound like that we don't. We do, but it could be possibly improved on, so that's something that the committee will look at.
Yeah, it's the difference between a policy and testing. There's a lot of vehicles involved here and insurance that goes along with that, plus young children and a bookmobile, and it's just probably precautionary at this time.
Yeah, we actually don't have a policy, but we have all of that in 3 different spots in our handbook. And we also declare certain people that drive all those vehicles or work with children. There's a couple different things that we follow, and they're all considered, I forget what kind of safety-sensitive employees, and so that then they really have limitations on what they're able to do and what they're not able to do. So we really try to be careful with that. So.
I'm gonna get in trouble. I keep wanting to pull my mask down. Our next agenda item is LGBTQ library material and censorship. And I would like to call Valerie Carroll if she's here.
Now, Mr. Johnson, do you want to be the timekeeper again? You were that the last time. I think by the bylaws, everybody has 8 minutes to speak.
I can do it.
Yep.
David, I would request that, and the board request that we, since there's obviously people here of opposing views, it would be fair. I know we have some 10-day or something requirement for guest speakers, but I think in this atmosphere, it would be appropriate to have, and it's such a controversial issue, to have both sides represented at equal time, and that's my request.
I believe, sorry about that. Everyone, I believe, got a copy of the rules at the last board meeting. They're also posted on the library website. Everybody had an equal chance to ask to speak. Unless the board wants to entertain a motion to approve it, I say no, because we do have rules for a reason.
I do make that motion.
And I will second that. At the last meeting, that was not passed out like any sort of paper form, and so then people wouldn't have it gone to the meeting. And then it came down to the issue of business days or regular days, and what's a business day at the library? They're open 7 days a week. So I think just because the perception is to hang up on a technicality, and I want to hear equally from both sides, and I think that that's a reasonable request.
She can stay after the meeting in here if she wants to.
So, everybody that's in
No,
favor,
I cannot, the suggestion to stay after the meeting and listen would mean that we are no longer a public meeting.
Right, but you want to hear that.
So the motion is that we allow equal discussion here.
So, all in favor?
No, I gotta go one by one.
We'll take a roll call count.
Roll call vote.
We'll take a roll call because Ms. Lilly is on the phone.
Okay.
Go ahead, I'll kick in.
Okay.
Mark,
Yes, I'm sorry, I hope that we allow equal time.
Yes.
No.
Mike Johnson, no.
Fred Hawkins, no.
Janice Griffin, no.
And Ms. Lilly, do you vote yes or no?
Please repeat repeat the move again.
If I have it straight, that the motion is to allow other people to talk, even if they didn't follow the policy that was set up in place.
Point of order, I think, I don't know if that, entertain that, I don't know.
The signal is on and off.
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
don't know how she can keep up with what we're
Yeah.
discussing here. I don't think this is great.
Can I hear the motion again?
Let me let Mark say it again. It's Mark's motion.
Yes, ma'am, I just mentioned that we allow equal time for individuals to speak for or opposed to, or just their heart on this issue. And we do have a number of people, that signed up, but I think it was confusing as far as whether it's 10 business days and is that 7 days a week, or is that just Monday through Friday? And there was some confusion, and I think people, they're not keeping up with the technicalities of the exact rules of the library, whether they can speak at a public meeting, and they're not thinking about that necessarily 10 business days out. And so I think that rule is
Okay,
pretty
but
out of balance. But the motion is to allow equal time on the issue between individuals. So
equal time for each individual, right?
Right,
I'm sorry,
so
on opposing sides of the issue.
there are some people that are on the agenda tonight that, there were,
Stand up. Stand up, it's the right.
that gave me notice 10 days or more prior, 10 business days or more prior, and they told me what they wanted to talk about. Now, that's all that the policy says that you have to do. So the motion is to allow other people that did not do that to also speak.
The motion is for the people who sign up to address the board 10 days in advance to have equal amount of time to do.
It's really to allow other people that didn't follow that procedure to also address the board. The 8 people that have done it correctly are going to speak to the board. They're on the agenda. What Mr. Nichols is asking or put forth is to allow other people that did not follow those 2 rules to also speak to the board.
Okay, so you're taking a vote and mine is no.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
So 5 to 2, if you want to speak, you can get your name in for next month. So you've been forewarned again that it's 10 business days.
Will you take discussion on this item? Will you take public discussion?
Sure, I mean, anybody, I'm sorry I cut you off, yeah, I mean, anybody that comes through can state what they want to state on the agenda. So yeah, if we've got multiple people that want to talk about this item, then we need to entertain this item on the agenda.
This motion that we just made, correct?
Yeah,
Is that what-
oh, this motion, well, I mean,
Failed. This motion
Okay,
failed.
so are you going, I just want to be sure I understand.
Let's go, Valerie.
The discussion that you're talking about that we're entertaining, I think
well, so the
we should
idea
finish.
behind the motion, as I gather, was we've got a controversial issue with 2 pretty clear sides. We want to make sure, the idea was to get folks who may not have technically met the requirement, but give equal,
Yes.
say on each side. So the motion to do that has failed,
Yes.
but anybody that wants to get on the October agenda, what I understood you to be asking was, will we bring this topic back up for discussion as an agenda item for anybody else who wants to talk about it? And my take on that is, yeah, absolutely we should. If a member of the public
Okay.
wants to come and speak on this topic, we need to have it as an agenda item. again.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a good point. It wasn't what I was thinking, but
Yeah,
that's fine.
I think we were,
Yeah.
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, okay, and then before we start, are you going to allow public discussion in response to the speakers here?
No.
I don't believe so,
Is this
because
a public
this is public comments that they're making to the board, so I'm not really sure,
Sure.
I'm not really sure I'm understanding what you want to happen. These people just told me that they wanted to speak about this topic, and they gave it to me 10 days in advance. I didn't stop anybody or not stop anybody, these were just the 8 people that came forward and asked me to do this, and so I just put them on the agenda.
I think
Let's
not,
begin.
because, I mean, it would be the same as letting them speak. And
Yeah.
wouldn't be fair.
Well, now
If they-
sometimes it's like a shortened response time, like in some venues, like, say she speaks for 8 minutes, someone can have 2 minutes to respond.
No.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Hello, hi. My name is Valerie Carroll. Good evening. I am here to make a detailed argument for maintaining the status quo as it relates to the library's purchase, placement, and display of children's material that have LGBTQ themes. Content of the speech is personal, and that's because this topic is an intersection of personal identity and values in our communities. 4 things about me that inform my position on this issue. I was a sheltered child. I was a former CCJPL library employee, current library professional, and I'm a parent. As a child, I was very sheltered by religious parents in a rural community. Most television, movies, music, and books were effectively banned in my household. I grew up either not knowing what certain things were or only knowing that they were somehow satanic. As a parent now, I understand the impetus and the right to protect your child from information that you feel is harmful. My parents loved me and were doing what they thought was in my best interest. But growing up sheltered made me uncultured. It made me unprepared. Despite my grades, interactions with my peers made me feel stupid and disconnected from the rest of the world. With access to only my parents' ideas of culture and current events, I became incredibly judgmental of others. It was only through reading books with new perspectives, starting with Meet Talk Pretty One Day by gay humorist David Sedaris, and meeting people from different backgrounds in college that I could see how harmful this attitude was. I still think about how having access to age-appropriate materials that could have explained the world to me might have changed my life. I have a lot more I could say about this, but in the interest of time, I'm going to move on. Between 2011 and 2016, I worked at CCJPL, first in the Information Services Department and later as the library's first outreach coordinator. I learned a number of things working at the library, including processes around book selection, display creation, and policy development. I got to know the folks who work at the library, and I can tell you no one is more invested in getting this right than they are. They live, eat, and breathe their service to this community. And they accept minimal salaries, all for the love of the library and the people they serve. Book selection and overall collection development requires a team of people. They are guided by a person whose full-time job is making sure what's on the shelves is current, relevant to all members of the community, and comprehensive with regard to subject matter. While there are some who don't want to live in an America or a Jonesboro where gay people have the temerity to even exist, this is not reality. LGBTQ folks and their allies are taxpayers who have a right to access information that reflects how they want to educate their children. Today, I still work with public libraries across the nation. My job allows me to learn about the policies, organizational structures, and collections of numerous systems. Nothing CCJPL is doing is out of sync with trends in those libraries. Every library I work with, even those in conservative areas, curate digital and/or physical book displays for Pride Month, reading lists, hotline numbers, specialized programs, and other resources for LGBTQ community members. LGBTQ youth are faced with being disowned by their families, bullied by peers, and increased risk for homelessness, substance abuse, violence, and suicide. These are not endemic to being LGBTQ, but they are the fruits of hatred and exclusion by their own families, peers, and communities. This is the reality that we live in, and library professionals across the nation and here in Jonesboro do what they always do: identify a need and try to help with information and resources. Another main thing not unique to CCJPL: fielding complaints from a regressive minority group that wants to use children's reading material as a cudgel in the larger culture war. The American Library Association reported a 17% increase in the number of books targeted for removal this year. Before 2015, when same-sex marriage became legal in the U.S., LGBTQ books made up only 20% of the titles challenged. That's now at 80%. Statement by the ALA reads: when LGBTQ stories are silenced in this way, LGBTQ youth and children from LGBTQ families get the message that their own stories, their very lives, do not have value, that they are somehow inherently shameful. I consider the library a critical resource in my children's education. They are 4 and 7, and we visit the library at least twice a month. It was, in fact, through a library display that my daughter discovered her love of graphic novels, particularly those by Katie O'Neill. I have read Princess Ever After to her at least 20 times, and it was one of the first books she ever read to herself. The book features gorgeous artwork and an LGBTQ couple. And, as with all children's books that depict romantic and family attachments, including classics like Little House on the Prairie, the focus is on relationships, not on sex. I've also checked out books on age-appropriate sexual education and read them to my children. What's important to me and other parents and professional educators who work in these areas is making sure that my children, 1, know the appropriate terms and function of their own body parts. 2, have a solid understanding of consent. 3, understand that as they start to form an expressive gender identity and attachments to other people, that those things may take any number of forms. And that's okay, as long as everyone involved is consenting and cared for. And more importantly, that I will still love them no matter what. The assumption that these materials teach children about the detailed mechanics of sex can only be maintained by never actually having read them. The role of the library is to curate a collection, and my role as a parent is to exercise discretion when it comes to what my children check out. When my children happen to stumble across information I wish they hadn't, it's my responsibility to discuss that with them, help them understand what they saw and why it doesn't align with our family values. Personally, I don't find it difficult to talk to my children about LGBTQ people. They may identify that way when they grow up. They will certainly have friends and family members who do. Love is love, and some families have 2 mommies or 2 daddies are easy concepts for children. I do find it difficult to talk to my children about LGBTQ pride. Because in order to teach them why we celebrate, I have to teach them about hate. One day I'll have to tell them about the Stonewall riots and about how our nation ignored a deadly disease for decades just because of who it affected. I'll have to tell them about pink triangles. I'll have to tell them about Pulse nightclub. One day I'll have to tell my children about Matthew Shepard. I'll have to tell them about lies they're going to hear in the world, ones I've heard from the other side in the last board meeting. Lies about trans youth and their medical care and mental health, lies about LGBTQ people being de facto sexual abusers, and lies about the content of the books that the library has on its shelves. As I mentioned in my introduction, the content of this speech is incredibly personal, but it's impersonal because that's why we read. Reading reflects who we are and how we think and what we value. Imposing measures such as oversight procedures and policies for the CCJPL collection impinges on my rights as a person, a parent, a citizen, and a taxpayer. The role of the board is to enable the staff to do their jobs, not do it on their behalf. Proposing that the library board make and/or review selections for any library department or display is inappropriate and will prevent the board from focusing on important matters like budgets and growth. This debate has already distracted the library from the vital work they do every day, most of it having nothing to do with these topics. It has also made the library staff and LGBTQ patrons feel unsafe, being governed by a board with members who are actively hostile to their professional experience and their very existence.
Ms. Carroll, your
Finally-
time's up, please. Thank you. Would you like to go?
Is Lexi Brenton here?
Hello, my name is Lexi Brenton. I'm a senior at Arkansas State University studying psychology, and I'm also proudly a member of the LGBTQ community, and I have been since I was 7 years old. Now, if you're not gay yourself or an ally to this community, you might say, there's no way you knew you were gay when you were 7 years old. That's way too young. And to that I say, you're right. I didn't know labels like gay or bisexual, but I knew I didn't feel the same way about boys that other girls in my class did. I also knew that I was different, and from the age of 7 years old, I knew I would be treated differently for feeling this way. Because advocacy and education about the LGBTQ community was non-existent in my highly religious hometown, I would grow up hating that part of myself. The next 13 years of my life were filled with guilt about who I was as a person. I would avoid the dentist because I was scared that I would accidentally come out to my parents while I was under laughing gas. I watched my best friend get relentlessly bullied and threatened for coming out as gay in middle school. I struggled with anxiety and depression after I graduated high school, but thankfully I met more gay people when I moved to Jonesboro and eventually felt comfortable enough to come out at 20 years old, 13 years after my first crush. I talk about my experience growing up as gay because while these are just books to the opposing side, our community knows that it is way bigger than that. We do not need another generation of children growing up learning to hate themselves like most gay kids learn to do. There are kids dying due to the hate that we receive because of the public's lack of education on gay people and the lack of gay representation in movies, books, and media in general. The Suicide Prevention Resource Center has estimated that between 5 and 10% of LGBTQ youth have attempted suicide. That's a rate that's 3 times higher than the heterosexual youth. This is what happens when you grow up in a world that says your mere existence is too sexual and sensitive to learn about, but in the same breath will slap the words chick magnet and ladies man on a baby onesie and think that that's not exposing children to a romantic preference at a young age. Amanda Eskew, I couldn't help but read your column that was in the Sun. In the article, you talk about how the library is intruding on the community's parent-child relationship, and I'm sure you did that with the image in your head that every family in Craighead County looks like yours. And I'm here to tell you that they don't. There are kids who grow up with 2 moms or 2 dads or 1 or both parents being transgender, and it doesn't matter if you agree with it or not because it's reality. My partner is a transgender man, and when we decide to have a child, that will be our family dynamic that our future kid will have to read about. Who are you to tell my future kid and every kid out there that belongs to a gay couple that their family is too inappropriate and sensitive to learn about? We deserve equal representation, not only because it's our right, but because, like what was said before, we put the same taxpayer money that you talk about into this library just like you do. In your column, you also said that you don't need the library to affirm your beliefs or your family values, so it is confusing that you're making it a point to try and censor every idea and book that goes against your personal beliefs. You do realize that books are a form of art, and art is subjective. What may be deemed inappropriate for some is perfectly acceptable and valid to others, and that your personal belief doesn't represent the whole public. Because isn't that what this is a public library? And the public is straight, gay, white, black, Christian, Catholic, atheist, and if you can't be okay with that, I don't think you should be on this board. I have a book with me that I actually checked out from the library yesterday that came from the children's section of the library. So it's a Bible story. It's David and Goliath, actually. Underneath the title, it's 1 Samuel 17:1, and I'd actually like to read that real quick. The stone sank into his forehead and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone without a sword in his hand, and he struck down the Philistine and he killed him. So this comes from the children's section of the library. I gotta read this one. It also talks in detail. David ran and took Goliath's sword and cut off the giant's head. So it's also talking about murder, decapitation. Personally, I wouldn't want my child to read this book, and I'm sure a lot of people would agree with me, but it's not my business to impose my personal beliefs onto you and your child. If you have no issue with this book that talks about decapitation and murder, then your concern has nothing to do with children reading sensitive material and everything to do with censoring gay literature because you're not comfortable with topics that you yourself don't understand. Whether most of you guys like it or not, your child will know and may even struggle with their sexual orientation before they let you know about it, before they have words to explain what they're feeling, before they even know what sex is. In this ever-changing media landscape where kids have ready access to information because of the internet, would you rather them look this stuff up online? Where absolutely nothing is off limits, where they may stumble onto websites that would show them actual inappropriate stuff that you're really not going to be ready to talk to them about? Because of this, I think it's essential that these books exist, are put in the correct section that they're intended to be in, and are accessible to the public. I believe that if kids have access to books that feel true to their lives, that chronicle their fears and hopes and desires, that they might just find a positive outlet for their emotions and discover a lifelong love of reading. Thank you.
John Abernathy.
Hi, hello. Hi, I'm John Abernathy. I actually want to agree with Mark because earlier he said that if the library has to exercise some sort of censorship or discretion, we need to know where that's coming from. We need to know the perspective that discretion is originating from. I'm a Jonesboro native. I was born here in St. Bernard's when it was just a big brown building off of the highway. Some of you guys know me. Kurt does. What's up, Kurt? We graduated.
Long time.
JHS, it's been long. It's been like 20 years, Kurt. Anyway, even if you don't literally know me, you probably know someone just like me. You know someone like me enough that I could consider you knowing me. Even if I didn't grow up with you or your kids at First Baptist Church or in Boy Scouts right across the street at the United Methodist, we have a lot in common. I grew up very religious. I grew up in a conservative household with conservative parents that created a very conservative young man. So conservative that in the early 2000s, when Arkansas was deciding whether we were going to allow gay marriage statewide, I voted against it. At the time, I remember being very vocal about it. I told my friends that was our word. That was a Christian word. And I just didn't like all the gay stuff being thrown in my face. And I know that's a meeting about this exact same thing in this exact same room. Wow, I can't tell you what changed me. I was well into adulthood before my perspective changed. I can just tell you that there were years of experience with people who were kinder and more compassionate and more patient than anyone I had met in 30 years of church attendance. Hoof-a-doof. I can only tell you the truth that it took me too long to discover, and that is that these are good people. These are good people, and I was complicit in acts of hate against them. I didn't feel hateful. I came to realize that it didn't matter, though, what I felt. If I felt I was being hateful. Hateful actions were being committed, and I was participating in them. I was co-signing on hateful policies, exactly like this policy that we are discussing right now. And we kind of come to a conundrum here, because I don't want any of you to feel like I'm calling you hateful. I don't want you to think that I'm casting that word or that label on anybody. But again, it doesn't matter how I feel. This thing that I'm doing, it is an act of judgment or condemnation, and I have to own that I am a part of that I am doing a judgeful, condemning thing right now. Likewise, my mouth is so dry. Likewise, I'll make it. You're just going to have to listen to this noise. Likewise, I don't know what's in your heart, but if you support this policy, if you vote for this policy, you will be enabling hate. You will be complicit in an act of hate. And hate is never worth it. I can tell you from experience how this works, because I fell for it too. Somebody for you at some point in your life has dressed up this particular kind of hate as something that you can tolerate. They've dressed up this particular kind of hate as something that you won't object to. And the party line around this issue seems to be that you're protecting children. But if you want to protect children, look in this room, because there are children in this room who need protecting, who are having an act of hate committed against them. And they don't deserve this, and you probably don't hate them enough to be the ones putting them through it. I can't tell you how to live life. I can just tell you how I live mine. That's with a burden of guilt that I will never be able to atone for, which I do not recommend, and a simple rule that if you're not a hateful person, don't support hateful things. Thank you. Can I really have that water? Oh.
That's hard.
Can everyone hear me okay? All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the material in the books at issue and what the policies y'all are about to vote on are supposed to cover. And so I went to look at one of the books that may be covered by it, and unfortunately it was checked out. But I was able to get the online edition, or the e-edition, however that's said. And I wanted to make sure this is the kind of material that people are aware we're talking about, and this is the kind of material that we're trying to keep out of the hands of impressionable children. This paragraph is about a young girl, about 14, talking about her feelings towards another girl. It says, unconsciously, I had these feelings even before I came here. Once when I was spending the night at a friend's house, I could no longer restrain my curiosity about her body, which she'd always hidden from me and which I'd never seen. I asked her whether as proof of our friendship, we could touch each other's breasts. She refused. I also had a terrible desire to kiss her, which I did. Every time I see a female nude, such as the Venus in my art history book, I go into ecstasy. Sometimes I find them so exquisite, I have to struggle to hold back my tears. If only I had a girlfriend. Is that the kind of material that we need to see about, just to make sure I'm clear on this, making sure that children, young adults, are, and may I yield my time to Ms. Eskew for a moment?
Will you ask the question?
Yes, I'm just making sure I can yield it for you.
Oh, okay, yes, thank you.
I think so. Well, it says.
Just real quick.
Minutes.
Right, just very
I just
quickly.
gonna see if you tell me what book is that and what section of the library?
Doesn't matter, it's about a girl lusting after another girl's breast, I mean.
We're talking about the children's section, so is that?
It's in the teen section.
In the teen section.
Mhm. So is that a yes, or?
I don't know the context of that, we're gonna have to talk about it.
Okay.
What book is it?
The Diary of Anne Frank. So I just wanted to bring that up as an example of how broad the material y'all are going to be looking at in this next resolution could be. I mean, a lot of people don't know that about, Anne Frank because they never actually bothered to read the full book. Something else that may be covered in it. I know there's a section in there about abortion, reproductive care. Are any of the board members familiar with the book, or the play, I should say, A Raisin in the Sun? Okay? So read in high schools across this country. Great story about 20th century African American family trying to work their way up. And there's a point where the grandmother is confronting the father figure. He said, "Son, do you know your wife is expecting another baby?" That's what she wanted to talk to you about. This ain't for me to be telling, but you ought to know. I think Ruth is thinking about getting rid of that child. No, Ruth wouldn't do that. When the world gets ugly enough, a woman will do anything for her family. That part that's already living. You don't know Ruth, Mama, if you think she would do that. Ruth: "Yes, I would too, Walter. I gave her a $5 down payment." That's powerful stuff. John, would you mind passing me some more books? Just one at a time here from the top. Let's see. We've got comic books, which have LGBTQ characters in them. So I think I may have lost my place on this one. But here, Wiccan and Hulkling. Wiccan is Scarlet Witch's son, by the way. You might see him in a movie soon. Tells his boyfriend, "I could never have imagined loving anyone like I love you. It's impossible." Let's see what we got. Oh, Frog and Toad. Who read Frog and Toad to their children or as a child? Frog and Toad, did you know it's a metaphor about a gay couple? Because the author was gay. And this, you don't have to take my word from it. You can ask his daughter. The author, Arnold Lobel, I believe I'm pronouncing that right. His daughter said, "Frog and Toad are of the same sex and they love each other." It was quite ahead of its time in that respect. I think Frog and Toad really was the beginning of him coming out. Let's see what we got next. Oh, Harry Potter, Dumbledore's gay. We can't have that. So, let's go with nonfiction. This is from the encyclopedia. Transgender is a term individuals who identify as self-expression does not match their assigned gender. Gender includes the beliefs, feelings, and behaviors that a specific culture associates with individuals based on their apparent sex. Assigned gender is generally based on anatomy and given at birth. Gender identity, on the other hand, refers to individuals' perception and naming of their own gender. This is for the encyclopedia for the children's section. There's also a few other books down there I won't bore y'all with, but it includes, I think, 2 sets of encyclopedia and the dictionary, which give definitions of homosexuality, bisexuality, transgender again, and also the gay rights movement in one entry. So let's see. Now, all this trans stuff is pretty new, of course. You're not going to run into that in a book, say, written in 1904, especially not one that would be in the children's section. But here we have The Marvelous Land of Oz. Now, everybody knows The Wizard of Oz, right? You know how many sequels there are to those books? Lots. But in the very first one, you have Tip, who finds out that his adopted mother, Mombi, turned the Princess Ozma into a boy. And of course, it's Tip. And when confronted on this whole thing about having to be a boy or girl, he says, I might try it for a while, just to see how it seems, you know. But if I don't like being a girl, you must promise to change me into a boy again. And later on, there's a character when Ozma, freshly returned to her form, says, I hope none of you will care less for me than you did before. I'm just the same tip, you know. Only you're different, said the Pumpkinhead. And everyone thought it was the wisest speech he had ever made. So, I point that out to just, note how far reaching themes of LGBTQ issues, themes of, related to the issues covered in this upcoming item y'all will be voting on, just how far they reach. You think about it, if you extend that and you say, well, we're going to, discuss every single book on here, one, y'all are going to lose a lot of sleep, but two, you're going to have a library full of empty shelves in a lot of places in this library. And I know there's another item agenda that's about whether, people, certain speakers may be allowed or not, where you'll vote to approve them before they're brought in. Now, I know what this is about. This is about the fact we had a trans author come here, 2 years ago, I believe, and, spoke on a young adult book she'd written that was, in part, about her own life experiences. Well, since we're going ahead and, going to make sure we're going after the LGBTQ authors, let me go ahead and give y'all some names.
Quickly.
I'll be very fast. Ann M. Martin, The Babysitters Club. Jacqueline Woodson, Brown Girl Dreaming. Chris Colfer, star of Glee and author of the best-selling The Land of Stories. James Howe, who wrote Vernacular about that cute little rabbit that may be a vampire. Ian Falconer, Olivia, that's a thing about a pig. Even though they're passed on, I thought you might like to know that LGBTQ people wrote Goodnight Moon, Harriet the Spy, and my personal favorite, Where the Wild Things Are. In conclusion, 5 of you have an important decision to make tonight. Please don't let our town end up in the same, books next to the Scopes Monkey Trial. Thank you.
If anyone in the audience doesn't have their mask up over their nose, I know sometimes they fall down, but you need to get it up. Thank you. John Caldwell.
Please, Mike.
Hi everyone, my name is John Caldwell. I'm an A-State student and I also work full-time in hospitality. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable and it keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7. Like many of you in this room, I grew up in the church. I was taught the golden rule in Sunday school. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Matthew 7:12. I quickly learned, however, that this was just a phrase, just a string of words Christians like to throw around to cover up discrimination and manipulation. When I was 10, my parents got divorced, and I later learned that my mother left my father for a woman. I was terrified because the messages that I would hear from Sunday school teachers and pastors was that gay people were going to hell and were not deserving of human decency or respect. The pastor constantly found opportunities to demonize the LGBT community and made them out to be something less than human. The church even went so far as to print off a list of companies that supported the LGBT community and told us that if we bought anything from these companies that we were sinning and going to hell. We kept attending church. but relationships and connections disappeared quickly as news spread about my mom. It was in the following years that I started to develop my own same-sex attraction. This compounded my fear and led me to fabricate a facade of holiness that I would carry into the teenage and early adult years of my life. As my preteen years went on, I continued to hide this from my father out of fear of what might happen if he found out. My hiding tactics didn't last too long, as he discovered pictures of attractive men on the iPod Touch I'd set up to buy. I remember that night like it was yesterday. I was in my room and my father came upstairs to let me know that dinner was ready and caught me looking at the pictures on my iPod. He snatched it away from me and gave me a look of eternal hatred before he rushed downstairs to talk with my stepmom. After an intense few-hour interrogation, my father made me watch as he took a hammer to the iPod Touch I bought. After smashing it to bits, he placed it in a Ziploc bag and hung it over the kitchen sink to remind me every time I did my daily chores how much they hated me. The abuse got worse and worse as I was forced to do every chore in the house and was beaten until I couldn't sit or lie down if they found one speck of dust on something that I cleaned. They slowly took everything away from me that brought me joy. Books, movies, video games, and even fun school projects were taken away from me. I had a knack for music, and I was forbidden to practice. My alto saxophone was eventually sold so they could buy fun things for my stepsiblings. I lived in the hell that God created, as my father and stepmother believed that they were doing what God would have them do. The beatings came to a head after my stepmom got into an argument with my father over me and forced me to sleep on a mattress in their master bedroom while she slept in my bed. After fighting until the wee hours of the morning, my stepmother tried to wake me at 7 a.m., and I physically couldn't get up out of physical and emotional exhaustion. She then proceeded to flip the mattress and throw me across the room, my head slamming into the computer desk behind me. She then held me down and slapped me until my face turned dark red and her hand got tired. I finally mustered the courage to leave home on foot when I was 15. It was a chilly April evening, and after finding a few flecks of dust under a pile of dirty laundry that I had swept around, my stepmom lost it and started yelling obscenities at me. She told me to go for a walk, and I did. Walking on the side of the road, I desperately wanted to believe that there was a God that loved me. And at the time, I still did. I hated myself so much that I thought that if only I could be holy enough, that God would love me enough to fix me. He hasn't, and he can't, because you can't fix something that's not broken. My experience is not uncommon. There are countless stories of homeless LGBTQ youth who have left or been kicked out of their homes at a young age for simply being who they are. There are kids that have contemplated or ultimately committed suicide because of their fight against their identity or attraction, and the voices of hate that continue to be perpetuated by many of you in this room. Look down. Their blood is on your hands, and it's not coming off. If I would have walked into our public library all those years ago and saw a display that celebrated who I am and refused to perpetuate hate and discrimination against a lifestyle different than our bigoted conservative Christian community, I would have known that the abuse that I was experiencing was not okay. The abuse I endured did not come from a God who loved me, but from a religion that continues to manipulate and torment people under the guise of love. I would have known that I'm not alone. I would have known that I am worthy of love, acceptance, friends, family, and everything that I aspire to be. I would have known that there is nothing wrong with the life that I will have with my future husband. The truth is that our dreams are like those in the heterosexual community, and that we all want love, acceptance, and a life that truly makes us happy. We deserve to find that without harmful bigotry and abuse from Christians that monetize manipulation. I dream of a world where we can live simultaneously together and to hold each other in the highest regard, regardless of our identity or sexual orientation. I dream of a world where this argument that we are having today will make us laugh at ourselves and dismiss it as insanity.
Sorry, John.
I dream of a world where love is love, and we are all the better for it. Thank
The children's library, the genealogy area, and the public computers will close in 10 minutes. If you need any assistance, please ask a staff member at this time. Thank you.
Bernard Smith.
Actually, I have those for you guys.
Hi, my name is Bernard Smith. I am a high school teacher, and I have also worked a lot with kids over the past few years, including youth ministry at my own church. And so I just want to put some numbers to the experiences that we have all heard today. In front of you, you have a climate survey from GLSEN, which is a national organization that discusses how to promote LGBTQ representation, especially within our schools. If you look through those numbers, you will see that over 75% of our students, our LGBTQ students, receive verbal harassment based on their sexual orientation, among other harassments listed there as well, right? And also highlighted is that almost half of LGBTQ students in Arkansas, 44%, are disciplined for public displays of affection that did not result in similar action for non-LGBTQ students. I only highlight that because we want to talk about equality, we want to talk about fairness. And so if we are going to have a policy that is fair, we want to make sure that the consequences are the same for all people, right? Included in your handout, you will also see a study done on LGBTQ representation in media. And I want to highlight that even though our LGBTQ representation has been one-dimensional over the past several decades, even that has been a visible sign of our community for all LGBTQ people in our community. So, I bring that all to say that we want to have that representation, especially in our library. And so I actually want to pull up the policy in question. And I want to read, there's a lot to this, as I'm sure all you board members recognize. And so I want to actually pull up the definition for sensitive materials and pull out a subset. So granted, this is not all-encompassing, but this sensitive materials will include topics of sexual and or romantic attraction, including but not limited to heterosexuality, homosexuality, bisexuality, pansexuality, polyamory, etc. So I did go through some books that included those materials. They included those topics. And of the 6 books that I saw that were in the Pride display, about half of them showed some visual representation of a same-sex same-gendered family, okay? There was no written representation in these books, just a visual one. I also grabbed some random books from the children's section, and I found from Pride and Prejudice, the Counting Primer, 4 marriage proposals, which also showed different gendered couples. A portrayal of heterosexual families in How Do I Love Thee, implications of heterosexual relationship in a book called There's a Baby in There, and another portrayal of a heterosexual couple in My Puppy Has a Motorcycle, right? So this was just through a random survey of books that were in the children's section, which we are discussing. And so I want to point out the enormity of the task that you have here. If you approve this policy that you have in front of you, you have an enormous task in front of you in reviewing and ultimately approving all the books that are in the library so far. So how do we make this fair? How do we find a standard that works for everyone? I believe, Mr. Nichols, you brought that point up earlier in the meeting, and I wanted to address that as well. So, we have a rating system used by the Motion Picture Association to determine which movies are allowed or are appropriate to be seen by all audiences. And I'll list some of those now. So these are G-rating movies, which means all general audiences are allowed. Beauty and the Beast, Romeo and Juliet, The Lion King, Cars, Ratatouille, The Princess Diaries 1 and 2, WALL-E, The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and A Bug's Life. All of which can be found in numerous children's sections, all of which have been determined by the MPA as appropriate for all audiences. All of these movies have, in one way or another, some sort of romantic attraction shown throughout the movie. So again, if we are talking about representation that is fair to all, then by those same standards, if you are going to exclude a book that represents a family with same-sex couples and a romantic attraction between the two, then you will also exclude movies and books that show romantic attraction between different gendered families and couples, including these movies here and the books that I have listed. I'm not here to sway your opinion one way or another. I am here to tell you the enormity of the task you have in front of you. And also to show you what it means when children feel seen, heard, respected, and safe in this community. So that is the job and the duty of the board, which I will leave to you. Thank you for your time.
Dean McDonald.
Good evening. We are here today to discuss several resolutions before this board that are, unfortunately, whether subconsciously or, heaven forbid, consciously, designed for censorship. The first one concerns children's, tween, and teen-sensitive materials. For those that weren't in attendance at last month's library board meeting, there was a resolution presented that would give this board the authority to regulate every single book that comes into this establishment. Thankfully, this resolution failed. This resolution would have made this body the arbiter of what can and cannot be read in a public library. And I stress the word public because at the end of the day, all of us pay tax dollars that fund this establishment. People who are gay pay taxes. People who are transgender pay taxes. People who are bi, lesbian, non-binary, pansexual pay taxes. People who are straight, that's me, sorry,
I pay taxes. Okay? All this goes to say, by what authority does this board have the deference to deprioritize one class of people under another? By what authority does this board have the ability to discriminate against any class of people? And these may feel like rhetorical questions, but we actually do know the answer. We do know the answer. Legally speaking, virtually none. However, they do have some deference to look into books that are of a perceived inappropriate, obscene, sexually explicit, etc. Nature. And thankfully, the Arkansas statutes spell this out for us quite clearly. And I would, say to urge caution for those listening, there are some kind of funny words I'm about to say, but this is the Arkansas law. Quote, hardcore sexual conduct.
The main library will be closing in 10 minutes. The children's library, the genealogy area, and the public computers are now closing. Please make your final selections and bring all items to the front desk for checkout now. Thank you.
Those words are not in the Arkansas statute, I promise. But if you look at the statutes, things of a, quote, hardcore sexual conduct, and also furthermore, any part of a person's body into the genital or anal opening of any person's body. Furthermore, quote, cunnilingus, fellatio, bestiality, lewd exhibition of genitals. All 30-some books that were in question at the last library board meeting do not meet that threshold. Not even close. They don't. And unfortunately, I shouldn't have to say this, but this is part of a greater false dichotomy that slanders an entire community of people, the LGBT community. I shouldn't even have to say all this, but this is a wonderful group of people that have been demonized and slandered for too long. And to be in a library and to think that that is of the same nature it's just not right. My citations are the Arkansas Code, Title 5, Subtitle 6, Chapter 68, as well as Title 5, Subtitle 2, and Chapter 14. And you can fact check. But my point is that I have never seen a book like the Gay BCs be so quoted on Facebook without anybody having actually read the book. It has been very grossly misrepresented, as well as the other literature that has come into question. And I just ask that we look at factual reality of what these books are. And it's nothing more than representation. And another thing that I shouldn't have to say, but I will say, is that representation matters. Now, I could have stated this at the beginning, but I'll state it now. I say this from the perspective of a heterosexual, cisgender, white man. And the reason I clarify that is because we have to be careful of the slippery slope that you're creating when you look at the resolutions like this body is about to vote on. There's a slippery slope. Members of this board are not just asking for increased responsibility. They are asking for the authority to vote yes, no, yay, and nay to both the literature and presentation of specific communities, to those who would consider supporting these resolutions. I would ask you, are you positive that you would actually want this? Do you want to give authority to any of those among us to vote as to whether we allow a Christmas stand? Do we really need to have a vote regarding Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Valentine's Day, the 4th of July, Juneteenth? To negate any community celebration or anything in this spirit, to limit what literature is allowed, that we are allowed to exist in, has to be one of the most un-American and unconstitutional actions this board could take. To do so would be an affront to our individual right to freedom of speech. I'm aware that during any library board meeting, per your bylaws, resolutions are not to be presented on the fly. We are to give advance notice to the public. I don't know if that's 7 or 10 days, but I know that we're supposed to give notice. And then this board convenes and votes on that specific measure. I would ask this board in the next meeting in October to consider an amendment to your bylaws regarding the board's censorship. I read your bylaws top to bottom, and the board is nowhere to be found. I think recent events call for such an amendment. It may feel redundant to have to address censorship, being that this is a library. For most, it likely feels like something that should be implied. However, I think it is vitally important to distinguish that a public library should prioritize equal access to literature, independent of restrictions designed to target already disenfranchised classes of people. And I think it's very prudent that this entire board unanimously always vote against censorship. Thank you for your time.
Sarah,
Elsie.
I knew I'd butcher your name, so I didn't say it.
Well, it's a tough one for whatever reason, so I will try to hurt too. I want to start out just by acknowledging, I'm just in awe hearing you at the beginning of the meeting talk about everything that this library has accomplished in recent years. I'm just in awe. It's amazing, and thank you, board and staff, for that. I like to think that we're all here because we love the library. And I speak today as a concerned mother and as a library patron. We are here multiple times most weeks. We love books and we love this library. And I asked my oldest daughter, she's almost 11 years old, a couple of weeks ago, what if we had never had conversations about the LGBTQ plus community with you? What are you hearing at school? What kind of things would be forming your ideas about this if we weren't talking about this at home? And she said, well, based on really what I hear is mostly at school, and I would think that those were insult words. I would think that whatever it means, it must be something bad, because that would be all I would have ever heard about it. And she gave me permission to share that. I think that's important to say. Parents, we have got to do better at teaching our kids how to extend loving kindness. We have to. And one way that we do that is by having open conversations with them about all of the people that they're going to meet, all kinds of people, and that no human is beyond the pale when it comes to extending love, acceptance, and grace. And I personally am grateful that the library has resources to help me have these conversations at home in situations where I get to tell them. I get to be in charge of that. Because I don't always, when they're at school, I don't always get to be in control of what ad pops up when we're watching Hulu and what awkward conversation comes from that. You know, we are living in 2021, and so they are going to be accessing information that is part of our culture. So thank you for providing information that helps me have those important conversations that are timely. I'm grateful for that. And I think that if those resources were either removed or moved, the children's resources were moved into the adult section, I probably wouldn't have known that they existed. So I personally am grateful that I was able to see them. And when I came in with my children into the library in June and I saw the displays, I was grateful for what I saw. Because as a Methodist pastor, I have sat with many young people like the ones that you've heard from tonight. I have sat with them sometimes on suicide watch, trying to help them get over this lie that God hates them, that their families can never truly love them, and that what they are is some kind of abomination unworthy of happiness. That's what segregation, that's what silencing, and that's what this kind of really unusual uprising in our community right now is speaking to the gay community. And finally, as I've already said, I love my library. We're here all the time, and I want to believe that the one thing that brings us here is that we love it and want what's best for it. And as you've heard, I was going to say I'm not an expert in the law, but you've really heard some good law talk right before me. But it does seem to me that what we're talking about here deals with discrimination, deals with segregation and could potentially really take already has taken a lot of the library's time and resources that could be used on other things. And so that is a concern that I have, and I think that both sides should be thinking about. And so finally, I'd like to close by reading the mission of the library, which you probably are all really familiar with, but all of us out here may not be, so that we can remember we have a lot more in common, and we have a lot of work to do, and y'all are already doing a lot of great work. So the library's mission statement, which I think speaks to the issues we've talked about tonight, is that we meet the evolving information needs of our community through opportunities to learn and explore. The vision statement is expanding imaginations, creating opportunities, and connecting communities. The core values: whatever you wish to discover, we fuel your imagination with programs and resources. Whatever you want to learn, we offer opportunities at all levels. Whatever you want to learn. Whatever your background, we respect your right to use the library. And then equal access: whatever information you use, we protect your privacy. So let's please think of our community. Let's think of helping our children love openly themselves, perhaps, and the others that they encounter. And let's do the best thing that we can.
Items 7 and 8's been tabled. The committee, Kurt, I'd like you to take the lead on that committee. It is Lily, Mark, and Kurt. Do we have any new business?
Well, can I reply to any of that? Especially, I mean, I was named in some of that, and I would like a chance to reply to some of David's comments as well.
Okay.
Well, there's so many points being made here, and I don't know how much to go into each one, but I'll try. And I don't plan on taking 8 minutes for this at all. I think sometimes it's easy to see each other as ideologies and not human beings, and I really want to not be perceived as that as well. I've gotten a lot of emails over the last few months. This conversation's been going on. Thank you for sharing your stories. I do mean that. And I think that you've made a lot of really good points, that this is not an easy discussion to have. However, I would like to know if our director thinks that Drag Queen Story Hour is appropriate and something that he would welcome and hold in our library for our children.
So I have been approached by other groups, and I have refused to have them come in. We are not a library. I am not a library director that's trying to make any points. And so we are not in a community like San Francisco where they have that, and it's a bigger community where they would have those things. If there was a group that approached me that had won some sort of an award or some sort of award for storytelling, which I really don't know of any awards that are like that, it would be something that I would consider, but only because they had won some storytelling award, not because I'm trying to make a point of bringing that in. So at this time, I would have no plans to do that, and we're not aiming to do that. It's not our, I mean, there's a group that approached me from Paragould and asked me if they could come in and do it, and I said no. I mean, we hire a very competent staff that runs all of our story times, and so they're the ones that, I mean, I already paid them to do that. There would be no reason to do anything different.
How long ago was that Paragould call came in?
I think it was in July that they asked me.
Okay, so think one reason why we have a lot of discussion that just keeps coming is because there's some unanswered questions from our community. That was one of them. So let me ask you, okay, this award thing, if you say, well, if it's gotten an award, how do awards get created? And can people, what I see in library books and stuff, there's a lot of self-validation or at least opportunity for that. So to have that as your standard, I'm wondering if that would leave a door open for someone to say, well, yeah, we've gotten this XYZ award, so then the event might be deemed more valid.
Okay, so I'm gonna sort of move this out to why we had the author that we had in 2019, because I think that's really sort of, I'm guessing, I'm not putting words in your mouth.
I don't know about.
Okay, but I'll just talk about that. We had that person, again, not to make any points. That author won the Arkansas Teen Book Award. That award is not voted on by any adults. That award is a statewide award that's voted on only from the teens, okay? They have 3 winners every year. We actually had the one of the other winners the year before they actually won, and the third person that won the award that year lives in England, so there'd be no way that we could afford to get that person, right? But when we're looking for people to come and speak, we're always looking for award-winning authors. Why would I not look for an award-winning author? These awards, some of these awards are been around for years and years and years and years. So for me to make any comments about one particular award or one other particular award, most of these are nationwide awards. It's not an award that I made up or anything like that. It's just an award that's out there that's across the nation. The only reason that we had that person come is because they won an award that was voted on by the kids in this state. And so we felt that it was appropriate for here. I mean, if we had lived in another state and they hadn't won the award, we probably wouldn't have had them. But it just happened to be that they won the award here, and so this is why we had them come.
Okay, so I think that just...
So I just want to say, this would be the same way. Like I said, I know of no library-based national award or state award that's on storytelling. I don't know of one. And so I can't imagine why that would ever come up as an issue. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know every award, so I don't know, right?
It has come up as an issue even in Arkansas for many libraries, and so I think people are watching this thing happen and are wondering, okay, what does our library think about that? What's their response? Being proactive instead of reactive. I think it goes back to what is the board for? I've gotten so many emails and even hearing some tones of that here tonight, that the board should not be overseeing this. The board should not be overseeing this. And I'm thinking, well, then the selection of books is allowed to rest in someone's hands. Ultimately, if I'm sitting on this board, I will get the calls. I will get asked questions. So then I'm put in a position of being reactive and trying to figure out, well, why was this done and who knew about this? And I will say, I've asked questions and I don't get quick answers. There's FOIAs that have not been replied to in several weeks. That's not within standards. So there is a perception that I think that we have to be really strong as a board to make sure that we are speaking to that. Not to say, well, I'm blaming you for this and I'm accusing you of this, but I'm saying the perception is there, so let's respond to that. I had a couple of other points that I wanted to make. I hear about compassion and love, but I'll tell you, I have received a glitter bomb in the last week in the mail. I received a sack of poop in the mail today. These are federal offenses, and my children are at home and can open the mail. I'm not saying any of you here have done that. I highly doubt that. I will press charges. Okay? These things aren't light. And I don't think any of you here condone that. So don't look at me or anyone else on this board and think that we approve of any hate because of some experience that you've had with other people. Again, We are humans, and there's a lot you probably don't know about what I believe, what I teach my children, what I say to my children. A lot of the assumptions that have been made of me are absolutely not true of me. Okay? To other people here who feel like they've not been allowed to speak tonight, I want to say, don't be afraid of being called something you're not. Okay? Because if you're not that, it's just words. I'm very disappointed. I'm disappointed that that we have not allowed people to be heard, and that I think this is going to continue to go on for a while because you keep pushing people aside. So, question about my address has come up. I have property in Randolph County. I moved to it recently. I still have a property in Craighead County. My house is still here too. So I have let the quorum court know that proactively, and I waited for some decision on that, on what to do. But it is that new property that was an address that was shared by a staff member here, and that's where I've gotten the hate mail. And because the story seems to want to get legs and be about that, I'm going to resign tonight. And I'm going to let someone else take this spot, and I think they'll do a good job. But I will continue to be looking into the books and what our kids have access to, because it's not about what the Pride community here is trying to do. That's not my question. It is about what's happening in publishing companies and authors. This book right here, Later Gator, and I want to say this, to be fair, this is heterosexual stuff, okay? It's a cookbook. It explicitly describes how to give a blowjob and uses those words. And any teenage girl and my 10-year-old daughter can pick this up and read that, and I might not know about it because we don't see everything they do. So you do have a responsibility here. You are the gatekeepers, and we can call for hard times. And I'm asking you to be responsible and do the right thing.
Do we have any new business?
David? I'll make a motion that,
I think you have someone want to speak.
I'll entertain one question per person.
I can hear you.
Somebody brought to my attention on our catalog, and everybody's welcome to grab your phone and look this up. If you type in Mulberry under the Go.
Say that again.
I say, anybody want to follow me? If you type in Mulberry under the catalog. This is about the Dr. Seuss books.
Oh, yeah.
Type in Mulberry, and then you get a list of a dozen or so books. But on the third book down on the right-hand column, or left-hand column is where mine is, it says, and to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street.
Okay.
Anybody with me on that?
ask her where her point is.
Is it available?
Ma'am, what's your point?
Yeah, well, open it up and look.
No, we're not going to do that.
Okay?
Tell her to put on.
I don't think y'all
Look-
treated
look at
anybody
that,
here like
so
that. We can't hear
It's
anything
children's
she's
book,
saying.
Dr.
She's
Seuss book,
mumbling.
right? What does it say by age?
Speaking up.
Adult.
Adult. So we got a Dr. Seuss book in the adult section of our library.
An email.
Can anybody explain why that's there?
David, will you address that, please?
We didn't put that in there, so does it say that it's available?
It's an online book. So yes, it's
Oh, I'm
available.
sorry, very sorry. So is it an e-book?
You don't know, it says online.
Okay, so if it's an e-book, we belong to a consortium. So if it's a consortium book, every library in the state except for ours has and buys books for that consortium. We cannot control what everybody else buys, what other libraries buy. But we don't have it. It's not from us. So if it's from another library, I cannot control that. I cannot stop that. But we don't have any physical copies in our adult section in this library.
Right, it's online, it's a children's book, obviously Dr. Seuss are all children's books, but it's classified as an adult book.
But but it's another library that did it, not us. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Then I had one other point about Dr. Seuss books, but it can wait till next month if I need to.
We're happy to look into it, but I can't stop another library from buying any book and putting it in that collection.
Right.
Every one of us buys so much books and put it in there, and the state library also buys some material and puts it in there. That's why we have access to 97, 95, whatever it is, 95,000 books. We can't afford to buy all that, but that's why we belong to the consortium.
Right, and the
Yeah.
other question was on the, Dr. Seuss books that got donated, but we can talk about it next month if you want to.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Do I need a mic or can I just speak? Am I good? Oh, thank you again. I apologize, my question has a conjunction up at hand, but I'll keep it brief. So I just want to make sure I understand correctly. Is the vote over the resolutions that we just talked about, is that being tabled to next month, or is that about to be voted on?
It's tabled till next month, so we'll hear from the committees.
Okay, gotcha. All right, thank you.
Is there any new business?
Any new business?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do I hear a second? All in favor? Aye.
You need to take the camera, I guess.
Mark?
Yes,
Linda?
Aye.
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 Lily?
Lily?
Aye.
Okay.
The board meeting is adjourned.